Hi, this is Amritan with ThePrint, and we are here at the 17th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival. And with me is Mr. Navtej Sarna, a career diplomat who served as in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs longest-serving spokesperson. He was ambassador to the US and Israel, and also High Commissioner to the UK. Hello, sir. Welcome and thank you so much for speaking with us. Sir, I'd like to start first with your early years. Your father was a prolific writer, and your mother was a noted poet and translator. So I'm sure you grew up in a household where prose and literature sort of pervaded the senses at every go. So I'd like for you to tell the audience of how it was growing up in a household where literature played such a prominent role.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a very rich childhood that I had, and the only wealth we had and the only legacy we had was books and listening to stories, watching my father and my mother write, getting guests at home who were writers, who would be sitting through evenings when all the people, they discussed only books. It was a very simple life. It was a simple country. It was a simple childhood. And it was focused on literature. And at home, there were lots of books. And I became a very avid reader at a very early stage. So it was very natural for me to take to reading and want to be a writer. And that's how it started. And I started writing very early in my life and in college days for newspapers and going to the All India Radio and all that. And all this was very much encouraged by the atmosphere at home.
So, as you mentioned, I'd have a follow-up question. As you mentioned that there were a lot of other noted poets and artists and intellectuals who constantly you would see at home. Any particular instance you remember that you'd like to share with the audience?
Not a particular instance, but this was this whole set of Punjabi writers primarily, who were my father's peers in that sense. And well-known short story writers, publishers, novelists. Whenever they would come home, they would often come and have long discussions with my father. And, so there's not one particular incident that comes to mind, but it was a constant flow of ideas, of literary people, and the highest value was attached to intellectual exercise, not to usual social things of going to parties, etc., etc. My parents never did that. So a lot of it was every day. All of us would be reading at night, and a lot of value was attached to that. That's what I meant.
Punjabi literature is very close to your heart, considering your heritage and your own body of work. Do you think Punjabi literature has got its due in the societal discourse, in the common discourse?
Well, I think that is a problem not just for Punjabi literature, but it's for all Indian languages. There is a great wealth of literature in all the Indian languages, not just in Punjabi, but whether you take Malayalam or you take Bangla or you take Odia and several other languages. And we have not had enough of it come into the mainstream. Translation is only just now coming into its own. You're seeing a lot more. You're seeing more awards for translation. You're seeing more publishers interested in Indian language translations, both in India and abroad. So I think all Indian languages haven't had and we've tended to come to literature through English. But that's a fact because it is a multilingual country and you do need a common language. So the only way that can work is more and more translation. So I'm sure someday we'll have a wealth of body coming from each language.
And so, my last question on adding on to what you said, apart from, of course, your father and mother who have left behind an illustrious body of work for people who are interested in reading about the times and life in Punjab at the time, are there any other Punjabi writers that you would want to recommend to viewers who would want to get a better idea of Punjabi literature and its origins?
Well, there are lots of Punjabi writers of that generation. There is the great Nanak Singh, who was of a previous generation, and his novels are now being translated into English also. There were other writers like K.S. Duggal. Then there were poets like Amrita Pritham, and there were so many others there. So it's all out there.
My next question is, of course, moving on to towards the later end of your life, wherein you, after serving in the with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for quite a few decades, you decided to turn to writing as a full-time profession. I wanted to know how that transition was initially, and of course, how it panned out subsequently. If you could share in terms of how your daily routine changed or how your regimen might have changed.
Well, the fact is that I was a writer before I joined the Indian Foreign Service. I remained a writer all through my career, and I'm a writer after retirement. So, in many ways, it has not been such a dramatic transition. I actually followed two careers at the same time, and I was very fortunate with being a member of the Indian Foreign Service that I could still write on things which were not political or did not deal with government policy, but if they were purely creative, literary and creative and cultural, as my books were, or historical, then the ministry and the foreign service had no problem. And in fact, it was a very encouraging atmosphere. And it also afforded me a lot of opportunity to travel to different places, to absorb different cultures, to meet people of a very different experience. And all that sort of helps a writer. And so I was very fortunate that my careers did not contradict each other in that sense. So I wrote most of my books during my service years. Only one book has come out after my service years. That was Crimson Spring, which came out in 2022. So, yes, in terms of a daily regimen, I don't have a very strict regimen. The fact is now that I don't need to go to office. So I can choose every day what I want to do, whether I want to write in the morning or want to write at night or want to just read and not do anything. So it's far more flexible, and I should not be having too many gaps in my writing now. That doesn't necessarily mean that I don't have gaps, but there's nothing stopping me. Earlier, I could have the excuse that, I have a meeting, I have a delegation, I have a prime minister's visit, so I'm very busy for the next 3 months. But today, I can't make that excuse. So I should be writing much more than I am.
So, my next question to you is one of your books is the Book of Nanak, where you've spoken about his teachings. In your opinion, what is I understand that throughout his life, he made it a point to talk and spread awareness about various issues. But of all those, what is the one message, his message, that you think is now more relevant than ever?
Well, Guru Nanak, as I've said in my book also, was not an ancient sage. He was just 500 odd years ago. It's very recent in human history. So his message remains very relevant today. Whether you take it of, the oneness of man, the oneness of God, the beauty of creation, the wealth of creation, the status of women in society, man's approach to religion, that he says, you don't need to go to the forests and mountains to be, for spiritual attainment. You stay in this world, you work hard, you work in righteous living, and you share what you earn in charity also, and you think of God, and that is the way to live. So all these messages, whether you talk of, the essential commonality of man, irrespective of caste, creed, or faith, whether you talk of the unity of the Creator, the Creator he sees as the nameless, the formless Creator, So I think all this has its own relevance today in a very conflicted world. And, these are essential and eternal messages.
My next question to you is about the more contemporary trends that we've seen emerging over the past few decades, wherein there are now so many new mediums for stories to be communicated. You have OTT platforms, movies, even social media, for that matter of fact, is being used by people to sort of communicate their message or tell a story. In such an age, do you believe that the advent of these new mediums will hamper literature or physical books, the publishing industry, or will it complement it?
I think it complements it. I don't think it hampers it. I think publishing is doing very well in India. 30 years ago, we did not have these channels to present our books to, but today we have so many publishers. And they are also adjusting to the technological changes. For instance, many publishers are now, also open to putting things out as e-books. They are putting things out. They themselves are doing promotion of books using social media. Podcasts are coming in. So I think all this is a fact of changing technology. It doesn't take away from the essential literature. It can add to it in forms. Of course, the formats change. You don't have to have a 1,400-page book and read it over 6 months. People have shorter attention spans, so you are getting shorter books. People are, quite happy to hear excerpts of books while they're driving. So that's a function of the society we live in. But I don't think that the age of books is over.
Moving towards the concluding part of our interview, I have some very simple questions that I'd like for the audience to know about. Do you have a favorite musician?
Favorite musician? No, I'm a very traditional sort of music lover. I like old film songs. I like ghazals. I like English music or Western music of my time, and poetic, eternal people like Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, etc. And that's my zone where I am. I'm comfortable. I know there's a lot of creativity around nowadays, but that possibly belongs to another generation, and I have no problem with that.
So my final question to you is, since you have been writing for so many years now, you have honed the process throughout the years. Is there a message you have for young Indians who want to become writers or authors or sort of get into the literary scene? Is there a message that you have for them?
Well, I think, everybody finds his own path. But the only one thing I would do is don't be in a hurry. It is not a craft that comes easily. And one of the essentials is to read widely. You can't become a writer without reading. So you need to read widely and to read an eclectic, selection of books, and before you start to see what you are comfortable with.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time to speak with us.